Good evening and welcome. Thank you, Henry, and thank you all for coming out on this beautiful April Fool's Eve. Some of us, myself included, have said it's finally here. So I'm really glad to see you, and I hope that this evening is as fun for you and perhaps as foolish as it is for your 9 storytellers. So, our first storyteller this evening is Clutch. He came in at the last moment, but he is a veteran, and we are so, so grateful to have him here. I just want to say I've known him as a pediatrician, and I've known him as a storyteller. He writes in his biography, Bryan Orr is a pediatrician, artist, and storyteller in Gloucester. He's a Fishtails veteran who's now written his own story for the stage. His story, called Can My Baby Fly, is ready for its world premiere right here at Gloucester Stage. Watch for it in the fall of 2023. And until then, let's welcome to the stage Bryan Orr.
Never in my 42 years of marriage did I want to put Bernadette's life at risk. And I certainly didn't want to do that on our honeymoon. But that's what I did. And this is where I learned, when your spouse says to you that something's not working right, it's best to listen. And if you don't listen, you are a fool. So this is what happened. We were in Bermuda having our honeymoon, and we decided to go sailing. Now, I had some experience sailing, so I thought I was going to take her out sailing and teach her how to sail. So we went to the side of Hamilton Harbor. Hamilton Harbor is a busy working harbor. There's cruise ships, there's tugboats, there's fishing boats, buoys, rocks, various things. So if you go sailing there, you have to be a little bit careful. The sailing rental place was on the opposite side of the harbor, so we went there. We got into our sailboat, and we sailed off. So I was teaching her how to sail, how to use the tiller, watching the boom. And so after a while, I thought she got the hang of it, so I let her take over. I slumped down into the boat with a bottle of wine that I popped open, with some wine and cheese, and I was slugging the wine, and she was sailing us around the harbor. After a time, she keeps telling me that the tiller is getting stiff. And I said, well, you're just running against some hard waves, or the wind is taking you, you're going against the wind, or giving some excuse. But she keeps saying that the tiller is getting stiffer and stiffer. And after a moment, the boat gets jolted. And I look back, and the last thing I see of Bernadette is 2 feet with the rest of her in the water. I jumped up, and the boat jolted again and almost flipped over, and I realized that I needed to do something. The first thing you do, of course, is let the sail out. So the second thing you do if somebody's in the water behind you is you take a life preserver and you throw it out there, and that's what I did. So we'll get back to her in a okay. So when other people tell this story, it's not often recognized that now my life was at risk too, because now I'm on a boat with no control that is running with the wind across Hamilton Harbor. So I'm in the boat, and it's just whipping across, just whipping with the wind. And so I have to look down, and I notice that I don't want to put fault here. You know, it's not useful 42 years later. But somebody had kept getting a rope caught in the tiller every time she or somebody went to that side. And eventually, the tiller got tied down into that pile of rope. So I'm whipping across, going towards cruise ships and other paraphernalia of the harbor. And I have to untie this tiller and slip off the rope and get control. And eventually, I do that after I'm about 200 yards away from Bernadette, which I think in nautical terms is like 5.5 nautical miles. Now, I turned the boat around, and of course I want to go back and get Bernadette, and she wasn't right there behind the boat anymore. And in the distance, I see a red dot, and then I don't see it, and I see a red dot, and then I don't see it, and I see it a third time, and I said, I think that's the life preserver. So I decide to go back and get her. Now, having run with the wind away from her, now I have to go back, but you have to go and tack back. And so I tack all the way back to her. And when I get there, after that 15 or 20 minutes of being gone, I thought she'd be a little happier to see me. And so with a look at her face, I thought, well, maybe I should circle around longer until she's in a better mood. But then I thought it's probably better to have her with me on the honeymoon. There are some side benefits. So I helped her into the boat, saving her life, by the way, for the second time. And another thing I'm not given credit for in this is that I did all of this, getting the boat back there and everything, and I didn't spill the wine. So I said, look, you relax, take the wine. And so it was still sunny out, and so we start sailing. And for a couple minutes, we're having a nice sail, and she's drinking the wine, and everything's peaceful. And then about 2 or 3 minutes later, these clouds come up, and it looks ominous, and all of a sudden we're getting rained on. And at this point we say, oh, forget it. Let's just take the boat in. So we take the boat in. As I'm going towards the dock, there's boats and different things around, and I get indecisive as to which way to come to the dock. So as I'm coming to the dock, I end up smashing straight right into the corner of the dock with a bang, as the people of the rental place are watching. So to recap, almost flipped the boat, threw somebody in the water, got rained on, disturbed the traffic of Hamilton Harbor as I whipped across it, and I smashed the boat into the dock. So the only thing left to do was to go to the rental office and ask for a refund. So that's what we did. Because there's as we went in there, there's a sign, and it says, in case of a rain out, we offer a refund. So we went up to the office and said, well, we want a refund. And they said, well, that's for like a full rainy day, and we have to cancel your reservation, not just for a passing shower. And I said, passing shower? My foot, look how wet she is. We got our refund. So the lesson is that you really, if your spouse tells you something's not working, you should really listen to it. And if you don't, you're a fool. And I'm glad to say that 42 years later, I'm only a fool 2 or 3 times a month. Thank you.
Thank you, Bryan. Our next storyteller is new to the Fishtail stage. Emily daSilva is a local writer, personal trainer, educator, wife, and dog mom. In February, she published her debut poetry collection, The Wildflowers I Planted for Our Wedding. She believes there is beauty in the simple and that storytelling is the most underrated superpower in all of us. Hear, hear. Welcome to the stage, Emily daSilva.
The last time my husband and I visited my vava, I let him cut the ice cream cake himself. And as a new Portuguese wife, that was both a rookie and foolish mistake. You see, when you visit a Portuguese grandmother, you eat. Sometimes she makes sweet rice, or there's fried dough, or if you're lucky, she's made the fresh cheese you love, and you spend the whole visit eating nearly the entire wheel to try to determine if she made it just right this time or if she overdid it on the salt again. The week before was my little cousin's birthday, so on this visit, we had ice cream cake. And my husband was about to cut into the thing, and just as he was, she says, "Emily, you serve for him." I was the definition of irked. The "I am woman, hear me roar" Emily blurted out, "I'm not exactly his servant, Vava." I could tell pretty quickly as those words left my mouth that I wasn't going to get very far with my Vava with that strategy, and that was another mistake. My husband's to my left, snickering to himself because he knows full well how much this is bothering me on the inside, and I really suck at biting my tongue, but I'm trying to because this is my 87-year-old grandmother I'm talking to, and I'm pretty sure there are unwritten laws against picking fights with grandmothers. Cautionary amendments, I'm sure were probably made to those laws with the Portuguese ones specifically in mind. She adds now with a pointed finger, "You supposed to make everything nice for him." Now, I love my husband. He is the purest person I know with the kindest heart and soul, and my love is deepest for him. Surely I would help him cut his cake if he required assistance. It wasn't the cake cutting that bothered me, it was that "supposed to." As a granddaughter of Portuguese immigrants, there were a lot of supposed to's growing up. Women are supposed to clean the house. Women are not supposed to go to the bar room, and women are supposed to be nice. Through my childhood and into adulthood, I met every single one of those supposed to's with a fight. And I'm not sure why, but those supposed to's and those old school rules constantly tore at my insides. I never wanted them to, but it seemed they always did. I should back up and tell you a little bit more about my Vava. She was born in the 30s in a small island in the Azores called Pico, somewhere between here and mainland Portugal. It is a place where women still wash on washboards in the backyard and hang everything on the line to dry, even the underwear. It's a place built on the basics like love, hard work, family, and respect. She met my grandfather, my Vavu, and married in the 50s, and their story is like many others. They had some kids and eventually came to America for more opportunity. When they landed here, she took a job at Gorton's for many years, packing fish that shot out of a conveyor belt and making friends with other women who knew the definition of hard work. She swept the floor, she fried the fish, she blessed the bread, and she raised the kids, and then when her own kids were grown, she found ways to clean their homes. I remember being little one Saturday morning, leaving my bedroom to find my Vava hands and knees, whistling and wrestling with a rag to make sure our kitchen floor was just the way it was supposed to be. And then one day, something that wasn't supposed to happen did. My Vava suffered a brain aneurysm, and everyone called it a miracle that she survived. When she came home from the hospital, she had limited mobility on a whole side of her body and pain that would follow her for forever. But what she was entering her home now with was this new need for assistance. Now she needed a little bit of help, which was very foreign to her because she was the kind of woman who could do everything herself. And my vavoo was quickly promoted to assistant. They would cook meals together, she'd shout orders, he'd obey so that the sweetbread and the fried dough came out just the way it was supposed to. And even with needing a little bit extra help, she maintained her powerful, feisty, know-how-to-get-shit-done self through it all. To give you an idea of how independent my vava is, keep in mind she walks with a limp and she has limited mobility on one side of her body and her arm kind of hangs out like this, but she's still peeling her own potatoes. She has a whole method. So she jams the potato into her armpit of her bad side, and she grabs a paring knife with her good side and peels it like that, and she'll do that every time before she would ever consider asking anyone for help. That's my vava. She is the definition of an independent woman. I don't know what it was about Vava's comments that day with the ice cream cake that I got so ick about. It was just always my ingrained gut reaction and response to meet those supposed to's with an instant argument. And I think grandchildren and children of immigrants might feel that same kind of internal turbulence. Modern day, old school rules constantly tugging at you left and right. I had felt that fight my entire life. As I get older, I realize I don't have to fight it so much. I don't need to be so one way or the other. I can be somewhere in the middle with all my power still intact. I can be the I am woman, hear me roar wife and still cut my husband's cake, if I want to. And if anyone knows those nuances that come with being a strong-willed, independent woman and wife, it was actually probably my vava. We're still at the table with the ice cream cake, and my vava now has tears welling up in her eyes, and she says, 65 years, my husband make everything nice for me. My grandfather passed away last year, and when he did, my grandmother got me this gold pendant from Pico and these Portuguese gold earrings, and when she handed me the box, she said, to love and honor vavoo every day. Maybe by making sure that I honor my new husband, vava is, in her own little way, honoring her own, holding on to her power to make sure everything can remain just as it's supposed to. I don't know if I'll ever be sure of that, but I am pretty certain of one thing. If there's cake at Vava's, you better cut it.
This is so much fun. I hope you're having as much fun as I am. So, yeah. Like a proud mom to my new children and friends. So, our next storyteller is a real joy. He's almost a neighbor, so he lives close by between here and my house. So, if you know where that is, you might have an inkling where he lives. His name is Mark, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. Mark decided to perform for Fishtails in deference to friends and family who have all been subjected to hearing his stories again and again without edits. His career traces a zigzag through the U.S. Army and Pfizer Pharmaceuticals, where he was consecutively a nuclear weapons officer, then a salesman, and then a sales manager. Then he zigged back to grad school in North Carolina, cashing in one life for another, becoming a wrestling coach and theater teacher at Phillips Academy, Andover, and now settled in Gloucester. His wife, Cindy, and 3 sons want to thank this audience for letting him tell you this story to you. Welcome, Mark.
Okay, so in the Army, there is a huge difference between the commissioned officers and the enlisted soldiers. Now, only a fool would wear an enlisted hat with an officer's insignia on it, okay? Now, the lowest ranking officer in the Army is a 2nd lieutenant. Now, you can get there either by joining as a private, in which you gain a lot of experience and you work your way up through the ranks, get a college education, and you can become an officer. Or you can, as a college student, join the Reserve Officer Training Program at any college or university that has such a program, and when you graduate, through military magic, you're a 2nd lieutenant the day you graduate. Well, there was that, and there was also the fact that every college that had such a program also had one scholarship that they could give out every year, and I desperately needed the money. So in 1974, they were still sending soldiers off to Vietnam. And I was sitting there in freshman class with a 1A draft card, and as far as I could figure out, I was the only kid in the whole college with a 1A draft card. So they could take me right out of my freshman class and send me off to Vietnam. So I joined the Army in order to stay out of the Army. So you see, now they couldn't touch me until after I graduated 4 years later, and I would go in as a lieutenant and not as a private. Okay. What I didn't realize was that Middlebury College, my alma mater, lost their scholarship 2 weeks before I signed the line. Because the Army dropped our program because we only had 6 ROTC cadets, including me. So they sent down from the University of Vermont, they sent an officer down every week to give us the bare minimum training. So I actually didn't get what I should have got in terms of really justifying my rank as an officer, nor did I get the scholarship because it disappeared. So my entire ROTC career was a failure except for one moment. A football game. Senior year, the 2 top-ranking D3 football programs in the country were Middlebury College and Norwich Military Academy up in northern Vermont. So the showdown game is going to be up there at Norwich, right? Now, we all knew that the military was going to make a real big deal about this, right? They were going to have the national TV cameras there, and they were going to have the entire student body out there, dress uniforms, command performance, right? Middlebury, on the other hand, we might have like 10 fans. Maybe I should call them spectators. Maybe a retired parent or 2. So I went to the other ROTC cadets, and I said, hey, look, we should go on up there and support our team. We can go out there and make a military mockery. Well, they all turned me down flat, right? Well, they were going to get commissioned into the Army any day, right? So what happened, though, that was valuable was I got them to lend me a bunch of uniforms. And that is when my ROTC career paid off. Now, I was a theater major, so I could easily collect a bunch of fools from my theater friends to go on up to Vermont and to Norwich and do this, right? So there we were in the parking lot getting ready, and I'm teaching them the close order drill, you know, how to march really badly. I mean, this is a parody, right? And we're mixing and matching uniforms and trying to figure out how to stuff how many beer bottles can we get into those big pockets in the field pants, right? Right then, we hear a whole bunch of guttural yelling and stuff, and there are cleats on the street, and here comes the entire Norwich football team running towards the stadium in formation. So I holler, fall in! And my actor kids actually did. And then I, right, face, about, forward, mark, double time. And we all were running right up the rear ends of the Norwich football team, and we're approaching the big, huge iron gates. Now, the military police are beginning to open those gates up. These are cadets, right? And so we're running right behind them. I snapped a salute because they're starting to close the gates now. So I snap a salute to my brim of my flat top uniform hat, and I go, "Cheerleaders, sir?" Well, they hesitated just enough. We ran right in. So here we are on the track, and now the entire Norwich student body is lining the track down both sides, looking like a bunch of ramrod tin soldiers that present arms. Right? And so we're right there, and we run right through the gauntlet, making gestures and cavorting around. And next thing you know, we're over on the sidelines, safely on our side of the field, where we stayed all through the first half, doing a parody pratfalls. And about halftime, Norwich sent out the 4-flag color guard right to the midfield, right? And then they had their entire 75-piece marching band doing all these precision drills. Well, we kind of took that as an invitation. So we went on out there, my 8 cadets, and we performed a mockery of military madness applied to football ineptitude. The highlight of which showed me right in front of the color guard, and instead of saluting the flag, I spiked my flat top hat into the ground like Gronkowski in the end zone and stamped it into the dirt. Okay, later, when I had my first Army roommate, he turned out to be another officer from a military school, Georgia Tech. When I mentioned Middlebury College, he went, "Oh, God, at the Oklahoma-Texas football game, they had some Middlebury asshole disrespecting the Army by stamping his hat into the ground." All I could think of was, thank God for dark glasses. Well, okay, so the day before graduation, I cleaned that hat off and put on my dress uniform, and they sent down a colonel from the University of Vermont to commission the 6 of us. 3 days later, we had stupid graduation parties, whatnot. I end up in Maryland. I went out and got a good military haircut, at least what I thought was a good military haircut. And then I went out drinking and dancing to celebrate my last night of civilian life. The next morning, way too early and in no condition to make adult responsible decisions, I drove up to Aberdeen Proving Ground headquarters. I remembered to take that flat top hat and put it aside, and I put on my overseas cap, right? I walked on into the orderly room. I was determined to make my 4-year commitment as entertaining as possible. So I took my golf clubs out of the pickup truck and walked into the orderly room, holding them on my left shoulder. There was a really old guy sitting at this battleship of a desk. Now, I had never seen a command sergeant major before, so I didn't recognize the rank at all. But he had enough stripes up his sleeve to look like the guy in charge. So, holding my golf clubs, I saluted with my right and I said, "Second Lieutenant Efinger, reporting for 4 years of shit duty, sir. Where do I start?" Well, he sat back really slowly in his chair without even looking up. I'm standing there still, like holding the salute, trying to like get a smile, at least a chuckle. Oh, it's beginning to droop. And finally, he eyeballs me. Bam! Stands right up. He walks out in front. Now, this is the way only the stare of a sergeant major can shrink your soul. "First of all, Lieutenant, you don't wear an enlisted hat with an officer's bar on it. You don't wear a hat indoors ever. You don't salute somebody that you outrank. You don't bring your golf clubs into the orderly room ever. And you start 2 doors down where it says barbershop, sir." Yeah. I had a lot to learn. I was no longer a college kid fooling around. I was now a damn fool named Sir.
Thank you, Mark Efinger, sir. Our next storyteller is Ruth Sullivan, And I have the privilege of working with Ruth on at the Writers Center. She has been working as an executive assistant, so she's a friendly face. If you ever see the open sign and you want to stop by, she will most likely be there, welcoming you or helping you with information. And I'm so excited to introduce you. She has many colorful stories and a wealth of experience, not only at the Writers Center, but many arenas: theater, music, and several years in office management with the City of Gloucester, with different City of Gloucester agencies, a local real estate office, and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Environmental and Workforce Development offices. Ruth's belief is that the best approach to life is with a sense of humor, usually laughing at herself, and along with others. Ruth also believes that live music brings joy to the heart, soul, and feet, so she distributes a music calendar with a Cape Ann and beyond focus. You can also see her on many local dance floors. Tonight, we see her here, so please welcome Ruth Sullivan.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming. So excited that so many of you are here, and I hope you're having a fun time so far, watching us tell about foolish stories and all kinds of other things. I'll preface the story by talking about how I first came to Gloucester. I was living in a cooperative house in Cambridge, happened to come up here on a whim, met some cool people, and ended up with the blessing of living at the Red Brick House at 21 Middle Street, which is just, it's actually, thank you, it's awesome, isn't it? That was a customs house floated up to Gloucester from Boston and reassembled. There were beautiful 9 feet tall mahogany doors, marble onyx fireplaces. And when I first went in, I thought it was a museum, and then all these people were hanging out, got their dogs, having a really good time. And I said, whoa, this is really cool. So anyway, it ended up there was a room available, and I moved here. So it was a cooperative house. I had left a cooperative house in Cambridge. And after a while, I said, you know, I think maybe I'll just kind of step out and do my own thing and get my own apartment, which I did. I moved over to Webster Street, and I said, well, I'll get a call and get a phone. It's about time to get my own phone. And I called Ma Bell. Bell Telephone was called Ma Bell to all of us. And I called up and I said, you know, I'd like to get a phone. I just moved into an apartment. And, well, they said, well, what's your name? Because back then, you didn't have to tell them your social security number. And you didn't have to give them the title to your car and everything else you could possibly have to be taken from you. And so I told them my name and that where I lived, and I wanted to get a phone. And they said, oh, that name, wait a minute. There's an outstanding phone bill in Boston in that name. I said, no, 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 no. I said, that was when I lived with the 4 other girls from college, and we had a cooperative phone. I moved out, and someone else put the phone in her name. And they're like, well, it still has your name on it. I said, okay, do you have the other next step where I actually did have my own phone in my own name when I lived on Beacon Hill, and I paid the whole bill. And that was really good. And they're like, well, yes. But I said, she said, well, you'll just have to give us a $100 deposit. I said, $100? Because everyone else wasn't paying that kind of money. So I said, okay, I'll have to think about that. So I hung up and I thought about it for a couple of days. I said, I know what I'm going to do. I can fool Ma Bell. Let me give it a try. So I decided to call back with a fake name because it didn't ask a social security number. And they didn't want the title to my car still. And so I decided I'll throw in there an English accent. How's that sound? So I did that exactly. I called up Ma Bell again, and I said, hello. My name is Cheryl Renard, and Renard is French for fox. I thought I'd just throw that in there. So I said, Cheryl Renard, and I'm so delighted to be here in the States. And I have a new flat, and I'd really love to get a telephone. And they loved me because I was English. They just loved me. I'm like, ooh, I got it. Okay, so I continued like this, and I said, now what do I have to do in order to get the telephone put into my apartment? And they said, oh, you just go down to Sterling's drugstore, if anyone remembers that, because we used to be able to go and pay our bills at a drugstore, or like 5 different places in Gloucester. Now you have to do it online. Whatever. So anyway, did that, put the money down. I said, oh, I'm so sorry, I forgot to ask how much that would cost. And they said, $25. I said, oh, $25, well, all right, I'll do that. I'll go to the drugstore and pay the $25. And then what happens? And they said, well, a technician will come to the house and put the phone in for you, and you'll be all set. And I said, oh, that's just lovely. Thank you so very much. I'm so excited. So thank you so for your time, and have a lovely day. Click. Okay. So I said, waited for the tech, I don't know, about a week later, and I said, I wonder if they put on that little piece of paper where the tech sees what's going on from England, or speaks with an English accent. I said, I wonder I better just kind of keep it up, just in case. I wasn't even blonde then. God. So I said, I think I'm going to just have to keep it up. So the guy comes in, I said, oh, hello, how are you today? I said, how very nice of you to come. And he said, oh, nice to meet you. And he said, you have an accent, where are you from? I said, I didn't have it on the piece of paper. So now I got to keep it up. All right. So I said, oh, from London. And he's like, oh, London. I've always wanted to go there. What's it like? And I said, thank God I've been there. Oh, I said, oh, you've got to go. It's just fabulous. It's so international. There's museums and arts and theater. And it's just such a historic city. You really, really must go. And he was like, you're getting me really enthused about going to London. I said, just do it. Just get out there and do it. So we had a lovely conversation, and he left, and I said, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm so excited to be in America, and I'm so excited to be in Gloucester. Thank you so much. And he's like, well, have a really nice day. I said, yes, you too. So he left, and I was like, yeah, done. I watched to make sure he pulled away. I said, then I stepped into my best Bronx accent and said, yeah, gotcha, Ma Belle. I fooled you. So there, Ma Belle. And I felt very good about myself. And I just have to say, most of you, like me, have been either made a fool of or fooled people. And I don't know how many times I've been made a fool of or been just the fool. I don't really want to remember, but it's a lot of times. But I have to say, the best part of all is when you're the fooler. Because then there's this fabulous sense of elation when you know that you've been a successful fooler. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ruth. I mean, Mademoiselle Renard. And Ruth told us that for years after that, she was known as, what's the first name? Cheryl Renard in the phone book. For 2 years, so. Yeah, so be careful. That's a cautionary tale. Our next storyteller is a fellow educator, and I'm so excited to get to know him through this experience, and you are going to love his story. Kyle Linehan lives in beautiful Rockport, Massachusetts, with his beloved fiancée. He is a former engineer and a current teacher at Gloucester High School. He loves a good story and is glad to see this art form gaining in popularity and appreciation for its ability to entertain and to bring people together. He's thankful to the Gloucester Writers Center and Gloucester Stage for putting this show together and for the opportunity to spend the evening laughing and learning from some talented and creative people. Please welcome Kyle Linehan.
In January of 2000, I changed professions from engineering to teaching. But before I did that, I decided to take a whole year off. And to spice things up a bit, I made a little commitment to myself that I was going to say yes to any adventure or opportunity came my way. And one day I got a call from the New Hampshire Academy of Performing Arts, and they used to put on this huge show at the Firehouse Theater in Newburyport with a bunch of different dance styles like Latin, ballroom, hip-hop, Irish step, you name it. And they had one routine where there's a swing dance, and they had 6 couples. And apparently one of the male dancers had gotten injured at the last minute, and they needed to quickly find a replacement. So they were desperate, and I was a male, and I was available for all 8 shows, and I was actually willing to say yes. So I was like the perfect fit for them. What they didn't know, though, is I'm a horrible dancer. Like, I have no rhythm. I'm clunky and awkward. There's no, dance connection, body connection here at all. And I was one of those dancers that friends would drag me out on the dance floor and I'd be clutching, like a cat going to the vet. But I had, made this commitment, and the game was on. I had 10 days to get ready for this. I used to be an engineer, and I teach physics at the high school, so I have this sort of logical and systematic way of approaching learning something. So I showed up at the first rehearsal with a clipboard and a mechanical pencil, and I envisioned asking questions like, do you think my arm angle should be 30 degrees? Or maybe 35? 35? Yeah, that's what I thought, too. And I thought I'd be drawing little feet diagrams with arrows and X's and O's like a basketball coach might do. But the reality was, Kim, the director, she had this huge show to put on with all these dancers. She didn't have that much time, so she kind of fit me in these really odd slots, like 7:31 to 7:54. I fit in there. And she would show me a dance step, and I would do it one time. I'd try it, and then we'd move on to the next one. And I'd be like, "Can we go over that again? I didn't really feel comfortable. Maybe try it again." And she was like, "No, it looks great. No problem. Looks really good." And this is the way these went. And then she would, schedule something 4 days later, and the same thing would sort of happen again. And I kind of got the feeling that I was basically a stage prop for the real dancers. But I had to go out there, so I kind of took this seriously. So I'd go home at night, and I'd put the music on, and I'd practice the dance steps. 1 and 2 and 3, jazz hands. I was terrible. And it's about this time that I started developing a new genre of anxiety dream. It's where you wake up on the day of the big dance recital and you feel grossly unprepared for this, technical skills you need to pull this off. The problem was, this was the day of the big show, and this was not a dream, this is my reality. So it's opening night, and I'm peeking through the curtains, and it's just a packed house there. And backstage, all the dancers are, warming up and getting in costumes, and I'm so nervous. My mouth is dry, and my hands are all clammy, and I'm just, shaking. And then, the lights went down, and the previous group comes off. I think they were Irish step dancers, and our group went out there, all 6 of us, and the lights come on, and the music starts. It was Bryan Setzer Orchestra. It was a bum bum banana, baby, baby, it looks like it's gonna heal. I think it's jump, jive, and wail, and boom, the dancers took off, except me. And I tried to understand it. The best way I can describe this was like a really bad 1970s B movie trying to portray an LSD trip, and there'd be rotating images, and I remember cackling sounds and close-ups of eyeballs and mouths and all this. I just don't know what happened. All that practice, I just totally went blank. I vaguely remember a lot of bumping into people. It's like a pinball machine that's knocking people left and right. My shoelace was untied. I remember kicking somebody really hard. And there's one point where I was facing the wrong way. My partner, Kim, grabs my shoulder, spins me around. She goes, "Come on!" This went on. It was like some Einsteinian time loop. This went on, and finally, the lights went down and the music stops, and I went backstage, and I just sat there just stunned and just like, "Kyle, what a fool you just made out of yourself." And I was sitting there, and eventually the show ended, and you had to leave through the lobby there, and there's still a bunch of people milling around there, and there's different levels to Fooldom, and there's one where maybe I went out there, and my friends kind of went like, "Hey, whoa, Kyle, whoa, you really messed that up. Boy, I'm glad I'm not you. Yuck, yuck, yuck," kind of laughing it up. And there's another type where maybe somebody kind of went like, "Oh, you were so brave to go out there, and you're gonna learn from this experience." But mine was so bad that didn't happen. People wouldn't even look at me in the eye. As I walked by, they kind of like dart away from this. And it's not that they were bad people, they were just so embarrassed. They didn't know what to say. What do you say? You don't know what to say. So I walked home. I took the farthest path along the river there, hoping I wouldn't bump into anybody. And I had 7 more shows to do. So I'm thinking like, how can I get out of this? Maybe I can say, hurt my knee. I can hurt my knee. And they don't really need 6 couples, right? 5 couples is perfectly fine for a swing dance routine, don't you all agree? So here I'm bargaining with myself. And I went to bed that night just full of dread. And I woke up the next day, and I don't know what happened, but I woke up with a little smirk on my face. And I remember lying in bed thinking to myself, and I said, "Kyle, did you just go on stage with a bunch of professional dancers at Firehouse Theater with a packed house in swing dance?" And I switched from, "Kyle, what a fool," to, "Kyle, shine on, you crazy diamond." And there's a lot of like sayings and quotes that mention something about you got to be willing to be the fool to kind of grow in life and to make changes and all that. So I sort of jokingly used this dancing fiasco as one of those moments. By the way, I did go back for those last 7 dances, and I have to tell you, by the 8th show, I thought it was pretty good. They even invited me back for the few shows in the summer, and it ended up being this really great experience. So. One more thing. I told you I was an engineer, so on the way over here I was just running some calculations, and I determined that there's a 72.3% chance that if I didn't say yes back in 2000 to do that, that I wouldn't have the guts to stand up here tonight and tell you this.
That story gets better and better every time I hear it. So our next storyteller is Catherine Clark, and she has lived in the same old house in Rockport since 1995. There are so many wild asters in her yard that she could name her house Aster. She's been a part of the mix around here since 1986. She always picks up garbage in the woods and on the beach. She's married to John Gates, and they have a wandering son, Henry, and a daughter-in-law, Paige, whom they just visited in Mexico. Please welcome to the stage, Catherine Clark.
Hi, I have an old friend who's a Zen monk. I was at her initiation ceremony in Salt Lake City about 20 years ago, and she had a close-shaved head and voluminous robes. And she's since become the leader of her Sangha, her meditation group. Her main objective as a Buddhist, is this working, this sound? Okay. Her main objective as a Buddhist is to learn to understand her own mind so she can stop herself and others from suffering, or causing herself and others to suffer. And she's also a student of astronomy and astrology, and she and I have the same birth date and same birthplace. And so she called me up in the fall and said, our Chinese lunar calendar signs are not the rooster, as we've always thought, but the monkey, on account of a leap year in the Chinese lunar calendar that is not accounted for on the placemats at Chinese restaurants. So she says, my boyfriend Nesbitt and I are going to go on a river trip through the sacred canyon of the monkey god along the Usumacinta River that runs between Guatemala and southern Mexico. And because you and I are monkeys, you and John should come. I'm like, is that a good reason? Maybe if you're a monkey, but our son and daughter-in-law happened to be sailing in Mexico, and they still are, and they were at the time. And as a young person, I went to Mexico a lot, and I liked Mexico, and I felt really bad that it's so maligned. So we go, okay, and so we think, well, maybe we should drive from Massachusetts to southern Mexico. And then we look at the State Department websites, and they say you can't really drive, from here. So we had to fly. So the appointed day arrives, and John and I walk to the Rockport train station and take the commuter rail to Logan, and from Logan to New York to Atlanta to Mexico City to Villahermosa. And 48 hours later, we get on this bus that's headed to the Usumacinta River. And I turn around to say hi to my friend, and she said a couple pleasantries, and then she says, I'm still mad at you that you didn't show up for that one party like 5 years ago. And I'm like, this is my Zen monk friend. And I'm like, oh. and I just said, oh, okay. And I just was sort of speechless, and I was bus sick because it's in a bus with the windows are closed, and I had to turn around to talk to her. So I was quite sick, and I'm sitting there going, So then we get off the bus to visit a Mayan ruin called Bonampak in Chiapas, Mexico. And I have the opportunity to buy my friend a gift because all these people are selling wares. And, while I'm walking around Bonampak, seeing all these marvels and climbing up ancient tombs and stuff, I'm silently sulking and fuming. I'm just, So, but heading back to the bus, I encounter this Indian woman, and she's selling these bracelets. And I'm thinking, nobody else is buying anything. And then all of a sudden, I was just sort of visited with relief and calm, and I felt better. It was a minor miracle. And I buy the bracelet. I give the woman the 50 cents, It's like, here, 2 bracelets. So I give my friend a bracelet back on the bus, and she likes it. And we carry on down the river, and we're on rubber rafts and kayaks, and we visit more ruins on either side of the river in Guatemala and Mexico. We see lots of monkeys, hear lots of monkeys, crocodiles, blue lagoons. It's very beautiful. We make friends with the river guides and the other passengers. We get really, really dirty. I have never been so dirty. And the second to last, or the last night of the trip, my friend and I are sitting in front of her tent with her binoculars, looking at the Pleiades. And behind the Pleiades, there's this green glow, and she says, I'm not sure anybody's ever seen this before. I'm like, yeah, it's possible. And so then she turns to me and she says, Bitsy, and she calls me an old childhood nickname. Bitsy, it turns out that our Mayan character sign, Chen, in spite of being amiable and brave, is often full of a drunken hostility. And I'm like, yeah. And I say to myself, she's not going to apologize. This is the apology, right? And I'm like, okay. And then I think to myself, well, this is why she's a Zen monk, and I'm a poet because of this drunken hostility that we're always. Anyone who knows me, I don't have to say anymore. So we part company. We never did argue, and so I go off to see my son. John and I go off to see our son, and she goes off back to Utah, and she sends me this text, and it says, Buena suerte, vayas con Dios, y Nuestra Senora de Guadalupe, and the Buddha you are, XOXOX. And I'm like, okay. And then, so this is the upshot of the story. This is the koan, and a koan is a paradoxical anecdote or riddle used in Zen Buddhism to provoke enlightenment. And so here you have two fools, a Zen monk and a poet, who use untold amount of carbon to get to a faraway jungle, whereupon they carry on a lifelong argument. But the trick is, the poet becomes the Buddhist by reacting non-violently, and the Buddhist becomes the poet by describing our predicament metaphorically.
Thank you, Catherine. Our next storyteller is another educator who I had the privilege of working with in Rockport, and he also worked with one of my 3 children in Rockport. His name is Nathan Cohen. Nathan Cohen of Gloucester is a multi-instrumentalist, performer, composer, and conductor. He's the director of orchestras for the Rockport Public Schools and an adjunct professor of music at Endicott College, where he also directs the chamber music ensemble. Cohen co-founded the neo-soul cabaret band, What Time Is It, Mr. Fox, and is in demand as a freelance performer and studio musician. Among his numerous recording projects was the Grammy-nominated album Simply Grand by Irma Thomas, an experience he shared with self-deprecating humor at a previous Fishtails event. Please welcome Nathan Cohen.
There is a relationship between life and death that is much like the relationship between sound and silence. And we exist in this space just above the inevitability of death, and that is terrifying and also beautiful. And that idea informs all of the music that I make, and it informs all of my teaching. That's not a thing I usually share with my students, but it's there. But the practice of music is over that inevitability of silence that we over and over and over again, with a lot of failure, figure out how to craft vibrations that have substance and shape and edges and tone and maybe balance and maybe harmony and maybe purpose and maybe beauty. And all of that is really an exercise in trying to figure out how to live a life that is in harmony and balanced, and maybe one of purpose and maybe one of beauty. And I can trace this kind of thinking back to when I was in high school. I had a class my senior year in high school, and it was Introduction to Clay with Judith Cooper. And Judith Cooper was one of those teachers. She was electric and passionate about her craft and intense and focused and caring, but with the very highest expectations, even when you are doing the most fundamental of tasks. And we were learning how to make pinch pots, which are, you know what pinch pots are. So Judith and I became friends after I graduated, and I was working as a music teacher, and she came to a show that my band played in New York City. And after the show, we were all out for drinks at this bar, and there was that din of energy in a New York City bar, and I was damp with sweat from playing the show, and I had that feeling that you sometimes have, that you're in exactly the right place at exactly the right time, and that is a lot like what it was to be in a class with Judith Cooper. And I have this potentially bad habit of telling people who are important to me the ways in which they are important to me. And Judith had been a huge influence in my teaching. And I turned to Judith in this busy bar, and I said, "Judith," and she put down her martini. It's one lonely olive swimming in an inch of gin, and she fixed her intense eyes on me, and I began to monologue. When you work in clay, and this was totally new to me in high school, you start with just this formless void, this like elemental lump, and the first thing you have to do is that you have to smash the clay over and over again against the table because there can be air bubbles in it. And if you don't condition the clay for the trials it's going to face when it goes into the kiln, if there are any air bubbles, the air bubbles can expand, and this thing that you're hoping will be in the world could explode violently in the kiln. So once you condition the clay, then you are sort of coaxing this thing out of the void, and it can dry out, so you have your hand in the water, and it's messy, and it's visceral, and it's unpredictable, and I loved it. And once you find this shape that you're satisfied with, before you fire it, you have to say goodbye to it, because there's a very real possibility that it's not going to survive this transformation. And after it's fired, you apply glaze, and the glaze that's in the bottle isn't the same color that it's going to end up because there's another chemical reaction that's going to happen. And so you dream of what this thing might be, and then you commit it to the second round of transformation, and this thing that emerges in the end has substance and permanence in the world where there was just a lump of earth before. And I learned more in one semester with Judith Cooper than I had in my entire high school career. And she was so passionate, and I just felt like being next to her with this passion for her work was going to keep me going. And I carried that into my own teaching, and I wanted to tell Judith how powerful that had been for me. And I wanted to tell Judith that in my own teaching, I thought about that a lot. And I thought if I could show my students how passionate I was for music, then maybe they would learn something about the world in the same way that I felt I had learned something about the world by how passionate Judith had been about her clay. I'm telling Judith all this. And I say, Judith, the most amazing thing is that I feel like I learned all of this from you when your main objective was to teach me how to make a pinch pot. And I thought I'd done a pretty darn good job of telling her how I felt, until I saw the way that she was looking at me. And she leaned in the din of that bar, and she said, "Nathan, you think the goal of my class was to teach you how to make a fucking pinch pot?" Thank you.
They just keep getting better and better. Am I right? So good. So good. Our next storyteller is a newcomer to the stage, but not to many of you in the audience or to me. His name is Coley Bryan, and he's spent the last 23 years living in and loving Gloucester. He's currently passionate about walking in the woods and building beautiful, useful things out of clay and wood. Please welcome Coley Bryan.
Hello. My story begins in my hometown, Bloomington, Indiana. It was, thank you. Hoosier in the audience. It was 1987, and I was in my second semester of college. I was working full-time to try and pay for it, and I was already getting kind of burned out. Two important things happened that same year as it pertains to this story. First, I heard Joseph Campbell speaking about one of the earliest human stories. And second, I encountered for the first time the tarot card deck. Now, if you're not familiar with Joseph Campbell, he studied ancient stories in cultures all over the globe. And he found, even in all these diverse cultures, a common storyline, what he called a monomyth, or the hero's journey. The short synopsis is a person of divine birth has a calling, and they go off into the world for a series of trials and tribulations, the fighting of monsters and beasts, and then they die. It's okay, because it's a metaphor. They're resurrected and eventually return home in a full circular storyline. Now, what does that have to do with the tarot cards? Well, the tarot cards also contain a version of the hero's journey in a form much more relatable to me, called the fool's journey. I have the fool right here on my shirt today. He's the 0 card, not even the first card of the deck. And you know the fool living on in modern cards today is the Joker. Well, little did I know at the time I was about to go on my own hero's/fool's journey. No, I cannot claim divine birth, but I was born as the 7th son of a 7th son. And some say with that comes prophecy of being evil or great, hero or monster. So for our story, that's going to have to do. Now, as for a calling, that really happened. But I refer to it as my stupiphany. I know you've all been there, kind of burned out from too much studying and work. So you're sitting in your apartment smoking copious bong hits, watching that swirl of smoke, and a voice pops in your head. That voice said to me, drop out of college, quit your job, and move to Oregon. Why Oregon? I have no idea. I knew nothing of Oregon at the time. But the voice was loud, and I thought I better listen. So I dropped out of school right away, never went back to class. I kept my job long enough to save a few $100s, and I packed my bindle. The bindle's this cloth bag on a stick here. But it came in the form of a school bus, 24 foot long. Yes, that's a bit of a short bus. It was painted gray, and it had a red, yellow, and orange stripe on the side. Inside was decorated with carpet sculptures, thanks to my hot glue gun and the local carpet store dumpster. So, all packed, I headed south. Yes, I know, for all you geography nuts, Oregon's west. But hey, couple $100 all the time in the world, why hurry? So I wanted to wander. Sure enough, the trials and tribulations came before long. mostly in the form of breaking down on the side of the road in nearly every southern state. As to the monsters, I was the lucky one. I only fought one. But I had to fight it again and again. It kept rearing its ugly head. It turns out that monster was my temper. That monster was me. Well, many months, nearly a year later, I had traveled almost as far south as I could drive. I was living in the Florida Keys in the hot, cramped bus and kind of tired of it. So I did exactly what you'd expect. I downsized. I took the bus off to the scrapyard, which will serve as our death metaphor for this story. The resurrection came in the form of a Volkswagen microbus. It was a 1971 camper van with a pop top. So I packed it, drove north, headed for home. Sure enough, more breakdowns, more fighting the monster that was me. But eventually, I landed back home. As to Oregon, it didn't take long. I eventually made it there after a further downsizing to an even smaller Volkswagen. It was packed with everything I owned, mostly just the tools to fix it en route. This time, I headed west, and I landed in Oregon, and I landed in my life as I know it today, because in Oregon, I met my wife Heidi and my daughter Lucy. You know Heidi, she's the storyteller-in-residence and your MC tonight. Well, after 2 more kids, my sons Miles and Owen, and a move to Gloucester in the year 2000, well, flash forward 23 more years, and here I stand in front of you today. Now, as to that prophecy, it seemed to me that being great or evil, hero or monster, would come with a real burden either way. So I decided to take a more middle path, the fool's path, if you will, which for me leads right through this stage, because I'm still on my fool's journey. As to how that story ends, we're going to have to leave that to another storyteller on another day. Thank you. And now I'm happy to tell you that you're in for a real treat, because I'm going to invite up to the stage your storyteller-in-residence, your MC tonight, as you've recently learned, my wife and our fellow storyteller, and she's going to come up and tell one last story for you tonight. It's a good one. So please join me in a big round of applause as we welcome Heidi back to the stage.
That one gets better all the time, too. So this is a story about a dream come true, William Shakespeare, and Weird Al Yankovic. I'd always been good at trivia, crossword puzzles, the college bowl competition, Trivial Pursuit. So when the time came, or when the opportunity came to try out for Jeopardy, I took it. I went to Boston. I passed the first test, 40 questions correct out of 50. I passed the second test, a practice round with a Bic pen, like the little buzzer. And then I was put into the contestant pool. Months passed. I'd forgotten about it. Maybe they'd call me, maybe they wouldn't. But then the phone call came. Hey, this is Jack from Jeopardy. We got a spot for you in California. Can you make it out? Can I make it out? Are you kidding? Yes, when do you want me there? In January. Keep in mind, this was January of 2002, a few months after the September 11th attack. So flying was fraught, but this was my dream. I was going to be a modern-day prospector, heading to California, earning a bunch of money, paying off my credit card bills, and returning home, the proud victor. I packed a bunch of clothes because they do film 5 shows a day, even though it's one stage, so it's the illusion of multiple shows. I was going to win. My 7-month-old son came with me, my mom came with me, and they dropped me off at the studio in Culver City. I did a little brushing up, state capitals, state nicknames, but not too much. I figured if I knew it, I knew it. And I just waited. There I was in the green room with my fellow contestants. I knew there was one category I didn't want, though, and it was the Bible. I was like, oh. So I looked around at my fellow contestants. Who was going to be? Who would I be competing against? Nervously, I waited. I practiced the banter. And then it became my turn. I was paired with returning champion Julie and other newcomer Nathan. Our game went well. First round went pretty good. Second round, I actually cleaned up in French dressing and Thousand Islands. But wouldn't you know it, Nathan was a real ringer for the Old Testament. Final Jeopardy came and I was in the lead. But not enough to guarantee victory, so I had to wait for the category, find out how much to wager. Alex revealed the category, and it was Shakespearean geography. Okay, that's okay. I think I got that, but I wish it was dogs or birds or 70s commercial jingles. I figured out how much I could wager and did the math. Nervously, I put the comma in the wrong place, but the producer came and reset my screen. What would the clue be? Of the 6 locations in his titles, this is the only one in England. Do, 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 do. What is the Merry Wives of Windsor? Wait, did he write that? I don't know. Merchant of Venice, Two Gentlemen of Verona, Merry Wives of Windsor. Did he write that? Do, 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 do. Back and forth I went, and I thought, Wakeman, you got to write something. So I did. Third place Julie revealed her answer. She got it correct, but she didn't have enough to come from behind. Second place Nathan reveals his answer. He did not get it correct, but he was wily in his wager, so it came down to my answer. Alex looked at me and he said, Heidi, you're shaking your head. I revealed my answer and it said, what is the Merry Wives of Wi? I had neglected to write Windsor. That's what I was thinking. Oh my God, my dream, it's over. All I needed was to write Windsor, and in my machinations back and forth, I didn't write what was asked. I wrote the title, and when the music stops, the pen stops writing. I know. It's a dream come true, and it's a dream not come true. So that day, I realized, well, things don't always work out as you planned. But like this haircut and like Weird Al, I lost on Jeopardy. It's a hard story to tell, but I appreciate the interaction. And for months afterwards, maybe even years, there were people who were like, remember when you were on Jeopardy? And I'd say, yeah, do I remember when I was on Jeopardy? So thank you all so much for coming tonight. This has been so much fun.